That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Welcome to BS, Beyond Stereotypes, a podcast about lawyers using their authentic voices to change the world.
As I think you know, I roll differently, right? I just I chart my own course, as they say, and I have a very strong constitution about what I want to do with my life and how I want to get there. I as I said earlier, I never grew up knowing the difference between a law firm partner and a law firm associate. So it was never my goal in life to be a law firm partner. I saw it as a means to an end, not as an end in and of itself. And so at some point in my career, I thought, I could actually do more good as a general counsel rather than as a partner in a law firm.
Welcome to BS, Beyond Stereotypes. I'm your host, Merle Vaughn. Here to BS with me today is my friend Claudius Sokenu, whose story I find fascinating and who will no doubt inspire all of you to embrace your authenticity. Hey, Claudius, how are you?
Good. How are you, Mo?
Good. I'm so happy to have you here. It's been too long. I certainly have not seen you since we all went in lockdown 3 years ago, and that's way too long. So I'm happy to have this conversation with you.
No, it's really good to see you. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So the way this works is we're going to have a conversation. First, I'd like to give our listeners an idea of kind of a brief bio. I don't go into long bios. They can Google you and they'll find plenty. But Claudius is currently the General Counsel, Corporate Secretary, and Chief Administrative Officer at Unisys in New York. Prior to that, he was in-house at another large company as an associate GC. He has been at 3 different AmLaw 100 firms and started his legal career at the SEC in DC. He received his Bachelor's of Laws degree from the London South Bank University, his Master of Laws, LLM, from the London School of Economics and King's College, and a second Master's of Laws, LLM, at Georgetown. What did I miss, Claudius?
I don't think you missed anything. You usually don't miss anything.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So where I love, I'm really excited to get into this with you. Where I usually start is by asking my guests to give me an idea of your story. Give us kind of your story, where you're from, and kind of what that journey has been like to where you are, and more importantly, who in your family or in your education or in just your circle helped you become who you are.
Thank you for that, Merle. I think my story, sometimes I sort of reflect on that. I was born in London, England, to Nigerian parents who had gone to England in the early 60s to continue their education. And at some point, for reasons I still don't quite understand, my parents decided that I would go to school in Nigeria whilst they stayed behind in London. And that is a very sore subject for me from time to time. And then I went to boarding school in Nigeria, finished my what we call O levels, which is high school, and then moved back to England and did my first law degree and my second law degree. And at some point during my first law degree, what you would call a JD, I did a summer internship program in New York with a now deceased judge. And the idea was that my school and the program that I was associated with took a bunch of minority law students and brought us to New York to work with minority judges and lawyers. And you might ask, don't you all have enough Black judges and senior lawyers in England for you guys to work with? And the answer to that would be no, we did not, which in and of itself was a problem. And so some of that shaped my early thinking around where I wanted to practice law, because I saw people that looked like me, frankly, doing big things that I thought I was capable of doing. And so at the conclusion of that program and at the conclusion of my law degree, I ultimately decided that I wanted to practice law in the US. Which then brought me to Georgetown Law School in DC, where I did an LLM in Securities and Financial Regulations, and then went on to work at the Securities and Exchange Commission on the honors program for a number of years. After my time at the SEC, I thought it made sense for me to go to private practice, and I worked in New York. As Mel had said earlier, three different law firms, first as an associate, then as a partner in the latter two. And what I take from all of that is the idea that, as a young kid growing up, I couldn't even tell you what a partner was, much less how to get there.
Right.
But through the course of my career, I have been very, very fortunate to run into people who've taken me under their wings, who've advised me, counseled me, and have been mentors of mine. As I said, I worked for a Judge Sheila Abdul Salam in New York State Court as a young law student in London. She encouraged me to think bigger than I could even conceive for myself at the time. When I went to private practice in New York, I worked for a partner who essentially took me under his wings and promoted me, and frankly stood by me when I didn't know what I was doing. But those were people that mentored me through the course of my career. His name was Hector Gonzalez, he's now a judge in the Eastern District of New York. Michelle Mays, who I'm sure you know, has always been a rock for me, and she's guided me and helped me think through a lot of issues. Ted Wells was a partner at Paul Weiss. People that I call on as I make important decisions particularly about my career. So when I think of people I have surrounded myself with who've helped mentor my career, those are some of the people that come to mind. And I will say this at this point, as a teaching moment and as a learning tool for younger lawyers in particular, and frankly for all of us, you want people to be in the room where you're not in, who can speak for you and who can speak well about you, because that makes a world of difference. So I've been fortunate through the course of my career to have those types of people who guided me and helped me get to where I am, which I'm pretty confident I couldn't have done on my own.
That's great. Thank you. I actually learned a few things. And one question that I have from what you just said was, even though it sounds like you're a little disconcerted about the fact that you were sent away to boarding school in Nigeria. Did that experience help you come to the United States? Because it sounds like you came here by yourself, all alone. Was that at least beneficial for that experience?
Yes, you are right that I came by myself. I figured it out by myself, and
Right.
and And here we are, 20 something odd years later. I think going away to Nigeria without my parents was a very, very significant learning experience. Then going away to boarding school where I had to fend for myself, plan my time, plan my life, and manage, my life, my money, my resources to get through school was an experience you learn from and you grow from, and makes you a better person if you're successful at it. And I think what what I what I think I've learned most from that experience is being able to be self-sufficient and being able
Yeah.
to stand on my own 2 feet and try and figure things out, because there's no mom and dad to figure things out for me or whomever else. And so when I made the decision that I was going to come to the United States, I didn't have any sponsors. I didn't have anybody else. I just started figuring it out. And I'll tell you an anecdotal story. I'll try and make it short. Uh,
Okay.
when I wanted to come to the US, I called up Monday Hubble. I may be dating myself here, but some people would remember the big, thick Monday Hubble law directory long before the
Oh,
internet came
right.
along.
Hmm.
And I called up the company that sold that, and I asked to buy a directory because I was looking for law firms and looking for work. And the lady who answered the phone thought that I had a great accent, and so she she told me that the edition that was up for sale was, they recycle it every year, and so there was no edition to buy. But she offered to give me a free copy of the old edition and sent it to me in England. And that's the
Nice.
first half of the good story. The second half of that good story was I then started calling around just looking for people that I had anything in common with, right?
Hmm.
So people who had Nigerian names, people who went to school in Nigeria, people who went to school in London, and I called and I called and I called. And then I stumbled on this woman who at the time was an associate at Jackson Lewis.
Hmm.
Her name is Uchente. She is now at Prudential. And I didn't know her from anywhere. I just called her and said, "Look, you have a Nigerian name. I have a Nigerian name. Can you help me move to the US?" Uh, she's like, "I don't know. I don't I don't have any money. I don't have any dead uncles. I don't have any bank accounts." I'm like, ouch. But that started a relationship and a friendship that has lasted the last 30 years. She told me how to take the bar. She sent me her bar review books. Uh, got me a hotel in New York City when I came to take the bar at a discounted rate. So, that people come into your lives at all sorts of different places. And those have been people that I have been fortunate enough when I put myself out there, to try and figure it out, who've been helpful to me. I mean, you were helpful to me when I was thinking about law firms and what I wanted to do with my career. And I remember many, many a conversation that we had, some of them fights, right? About where
Yeah.
am I going and how am I going to get there? So look, my biggest boarding school experience and moving as a young child without my parents to go live in Nigeria was simply to teach you how to stand on your own 2 feet, how to make smart decisions, and how to manage through problems. And I'm grateful for that experience.
That's amazing. I mean, and it's so different, for parents, especially now, and especially American parents. Like your parents were the opposite of helicopter parents, right?
Right, exactly.
I mean, now, I mean, it's hard to even. I mean, people do go to boarding school in the U.S., but it's probably for different reasons, right? It's not to teach you how to stand on your own 2 feet. It's to basically put you in a situation where you're probably going to be considered for almost legacy, purposes to IVs
Right.
and stuff like that. It's a very different scenario. So
Well, it's also a cultural issue, right? I found as I've as you know, I'm not married, right? As I've traveled around and had friends in air quotes, right? And you talk
uh,
about where do you want to have your kids and what you want to send them. Most people are modified by the idea of sending their kids away to boarding school, and the concept of sending your kids away seems to be a big problem here. I mean, I didn't think of it as my parents sending me away. I was glad to be away. I'm there with my friends 24/7
right.
and have autonomy, and that sometimes I would argue that it's not for everyone. Boarding school is not for everyone, but for people like me, it was quite an eye-opening experience, and I don't quite understand why on this side of the pond people think of it as in a negative, if you will.
Right. And it also gave you an exposure, a real life exposure to your roots, right? A
Right.
different culture. Yours, my roots for that matter, that I've never experienced. And hopefully one of these days I'll have an opportunity, but I certainly would never be able to be engaged at that kind of, be inserted into the culture that way.
I'll take you.
I'm ready. I know what percentage Nigerian I am. I'm more Nigerian than anything else, and I would love to go.
Yeah.
U.S. versus U.K. legal system. You've already, told us that one of the things is that there are not a bunch of folks who look like you. At least there weren't back then. I don't know if that's changed at all. And so it felt more familiar, and like maybe you'd have more opportunities here in the US, and you certainly have taken advantage of them and succeeded. Is it still that way in the UK? And what is that based on? Is it based on the barrister versus solicitor system? Is it class issues? Is it racial issues? What is it?
um is it still that way today? Yes, I think things have improved somewhat, but in my experience and in my opinion, it remains that same way now, not just in the legal profession, but in other professions as well. I think the legal profession, uh, given its traditional nature, maybe suffers more from this problem than say perhaps other professions. As I think you know, there's a solicitor slash barrister
Hmm.
divide, and it takes a long, long time to be successful, particularly on the barrister side. And so it historically was the exclusive purview of people who came from money, right, and who were class in that upper echelon of class. Because unlike the US, where some would argue you have a racial barrier, in the UK, there's the added layer of class barriers, right? And
Hmm.
so when you put those things together, the legal profession, at least in my own opinion, has suffered from um, a combination of issues that have made access to the topmost echelons of legal profession particularly difficult for minorities. What is interesting, right, is that as I was coming here, U.S. law firms were taking hold in England and in Europe more generally. And I think that has been a positive. A lot of the minorities that I know of, at least in England, tend to be partners at US based firms. And if one did a study of that, I think it is fair to say that there are more black partners in England at the US based firms than there are at the traditional magic circle firms. I think that's right, just based on anecdotal evidence and
Hmm.
the people that I know. It is not unusual for me to get calls from young lawyers in England who were like, "Look, how did you make it?" And we want to come do what you do in America because they had very few opportunities for us here. And so when you put all of that together, I think there are market conditions. I mean, this is obviously a significantly bigger legal market than in England, right?
Right.
You have the AMLO 100 and you have the magic 5 or 6 firms or whatever it is. And so when you look at the size of the market here, there's just way more opportunities for people to explore, particularly people who've gone to big, great schools in England, have got great pedigree, but no job. So then there's all the social, cultural, racial issues on top of all of that. And so I think there's been progress, but clearly not enough.
Well, and that's interesting. And I do know that, in terms of, I mean, putting aside the current phenomenon that we're going through, which I would argue is, we're going backwards racially and culturally. It at least in the U.S. we have made some progress in what we're allowed to do legally. I know in the UK, there's certain things that you can't track, you can't talk, for hiring and such, you can't even talk about. I think you may be able to talk about gender, but maybe not race. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that is my understanding. And it has consequences. I think, there is no question, right, that there is room for improvement on the US side as well. But I just think that the UK and other parts of Europe are even much further behind the UK than even say the UK is concerned. So there's a significant lack of opportunity for everybody, frankly, and then even less so for minorities, and that presents an ongoing problem, but both in private practice and in-house, right? So, and then government is very different. They have, you go work in the government, you might end up staying there forever. Unlike, say, here, where there's a pipeline and a sort of, some would call it a revolving door between sort of private practice and government service, and people go to private practice, then go do government service and come back out, and then so you just don't have that on the UK side of things, or at least certainly not as much.
Okay, and so that's a good segue into your journey through big firms. I know, I can brag on you. When we met, I mean, you had a phenomenal book of business. I mean, something just, unheard of. And you were, highly successful in law firms, and, and then you went in-house. Why did you want to make that transition? And how is it going?
Thank you for that. That's nice to hear. As I think, I roll differently, right? I just I chart my own course, as they say, and I have a very strong constitution about what I want to do with my life and how I want to get there. As I said earlier, I never grew up knowing the difference between a law firm partner and a law firm associate. So it was never my goal in life to be a law firm partner. I saw it as a means to an end, not as an end in and of itself. And so at some point in my career, I thought, I could actually do more good as a general counsel rather than as a partner in a law firm. And I thought that I probably at the time there were a handful of black general counsels at Fortune 500 companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of felt, and I think rightly so, that those who were in that circle, as small as it was, had the ability to do a lot of good. They didn't always do a lot of good for all sorts of reasons, but they had the ability to do a lot of good, much more so than law firm partners. and they had the ability to influence the direction of the legal profession. Frankly, in my mind, and I still think this to be true, far more so than law firm partners, at least on the social issue side. And so I thought I'd go do that. I had done law firm for 17 years, and I thought, let me go do something else. I'd done government, I'd done law firm. I thought this was a good way to enter the sort of third quarter of my career, if you will,
Mhm.
and do some good. So I, as you know, went to work for a client of mine as a deputy general counsel with a view to becoming a general counsel, which thankfully I accomplished, and I'm now a general counsel, and I
That
can
was
hire whoever.
quick too. That was pretty freaking quick, Claudius. I'm
I
impressed.
think so. I think so. I think so. And like it's you and I talk about these things all the time, right? And it wasn't exactly an easy decision, right? I was a partner at Sherman and Sterling, very prestigious firm in New York. I was the first Black partner at the firm in 100 and something years. It wasn't exactly sort of something that one would necessarily give up for an unsure thing, right? It wasn't like I walked out the door as general counsel. I walked out the door as a deputy to pay my dues and then hopefully become a general counsel. And
And you
again,
went to Texas. Not that we're going to diss Texas, but you did go to
yeah, well,
Texas.
that's a whole different conversation. That's a whole different conversation. And again, it goes back to what you said earlier, right? Being able to see an opportunity, being able to take the opportunity and being able to make of it something good are difficult decisions. And so when I sort of left law firm, I agonized about whether or not it was the right decision. I missed the prestige of being a major law firm partner. I had fewer girlfriends, but I made less money. And
I know, and we might add that I placed you at that law
you,
firm, so I know how much money you were making.
you know, so and then you go off, and somehow sometimes people view that as a backward step. And I didn't think it was a backward step. I thought it was a step in the right direction, and so it has proven. And like in my job, I inherited, for example, I inherited a legal department that had zero Black people and had very few minority law firms or minority partners at majority law firms representing us. And that for me was not a good group to have. And so one of the very first things I did was go out and hire diverse people and
Mhm.
brought in women and people of color into my legal department because I think you get the best legal minds together in a room from different backgrounds, we get better answers. We also made clear to our law firms we want diverse partners as relationship partners. And the firms that don't want to do that, they don't work for us.
Good
And
for
I
you.
have I have a CEO that supports that. We have a company that supports that. And so in my mind, what I set out to do, I think I'm doing, which is be an influence, be a standout that people can look up to and try to make change from within. And I think I'm on my way to doing that.
Well, I know you are, and I know you well enough to know that you're not going to stop until you've done it like you know spectacularly. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next. So let's go to some fun stuff here. Um, Soccer, or should I say football?
You should
Um,
you should never ever ever say soccer. That is not gonna work.
okay.
That's not gonna work.
I thought you were going to say that. So I know that you have a love of football, that you're a huge football fan. Tell us where that came from. Did you play? Did you want to play professionally? Who's your team? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, like we should set an hour aside for this conversation. I grew up like most kids playing football. I had delusions of grandeur that I could be a great footballer. My mother didn't share that view. She thought I should stay in school, and I think she probably had the better of that discussion. So I stayed in school. I played football throughout my schooling days. I still play football on a team that I play with in London whenever I'm in London. I've been playing with that same team for 30 plus years.
Wow.
Uh, and I grew up in an area of North London where you supported Tottenham or you supported Arsenal, and I chose to support Tottenham. It's a labor of love, as you know. I travel extensively, and I make it a duty to go to as many games as I can. You outside, I'm very passionate about my work, right? But outside of work, you want to have some hobbies that you enjoy, because the job itself is really difficult and is stressful, and some outlet that allows you to sort of live a little. Some people play tennis, some people like to swim, some people like to do fencing, which I would not advise, but to each his own. But for me, just going to a football game, I support Tottenham Hotspur, as I said. I try to get to as many games as I can, and it
I
just
think you
gives.
go to all of them, don't you? I mean, I don't. Have you missed any?
I miss some. I miss some. And like, one of the advantages of being able to work from home or anywhere you are these days is it doesn't matter where you're sitting. So
Right.
I could be in London. I do the same work I do in New York, and I could go to a game and see my mom. And it's good to have balance, because the job can be all consuming, right? And as professionals, we take our responsibilities very, very seriously, and but we also need an outlet, and we need to have some fun, and that is my way of having fun. It's also my way of seeing my friends that I grew up with. Everybody's doing well, but we don't see each other as much, so it's a chance to get together with family and friends and have a good time, and we're always yelling about something, so it's,
Well,
it grounds you.
well, and also I've noticed that you seem to be able to get in the locker room and on the field. And I mean, what is your association with the team?
I can't tell you that.
If you told
I'll
me, you'd
tell
have to
you that.
kill me.
But but you know, I so there's something called the Tunnel Club. I sit in the Tunnel Club, which is a very, very exclusive area of the stadium, and the players are next door when they finish playing. So you get
Mhm.
to mingle with the players and people you consider heroes or whatever. And yeah, you go in the dressing room and you're part of. I mean, as I said, I played the game, so I have a love for the game beyond the norm, and some of the players I know because I hang out with them, and it's just an interesting way to see behind the scenes, and that's fun for me. I mean, I can watch the game on TV and it'd be fine, but being being at the stadium, being with the players, hanging out with the players is always fun.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
guess I guess I'm living the life that that I would otherwise have liked to live if I wasn't a lawyer. So it's fun.
yeah, you're living that life, but you don't have to go out there and run up and down the field every day for a living, right?
Oh, oh.
So, are you familiar with the show Ted Lasso?
Yes, I am familiar. Every American asks me that question. Hi, do you watch Ted Lasso? I'm like,
And
yes,
so,
I
I
do.
mean, what do you think of? I mean, what do you think of the fascination that Americans are having with that show? And I mean, what are your thoughts?
It's interesting. I watch it. I haven't watched season 3 because usually I just want to watch it all in one go.
Yeah.
Um, I, I I think it's actually less about the game, right? It's more about the people and interpersonal relationships. And there's a certain quaintness to it that is unspoiled, if you will, which is different from most American shows in my mind. Um, I enjoy it, not for the foot. The football is dreadful.
That's what I wanted to know.
you know, I don't enjoy it for the football, but I enjoy it for everything else around it. And then I plug myself into what I know about football and what I have seen. I have friends whose kids are professional footballers. I have friends who have been professional footballers. So I just sort of puts you at the center of all of that, and you know what's BS and what's not. But it's a good show, not so much about the football, but about the human relationships. And one of the players came from another country, don't speak no English, and still had to figure it out. When I came to America, I didn't speak Ebonics, but I had to figure it out as well. Right? They don't speak Ebonics anymore. People don't say that. You don't hear that word anymore, right?
No, you
Remember
don't.
back in the 90s, that was like the thing.
Well,
But anyway.
But we still have to code switch, right? I mean, I
Right.
don't know, you speak the King's English, but so I don't know if you feel like you have to code switch just being a Black person, but I feel like I code switch.
Yeah, no, we all have to, right? Because it's the rules of engagement, and you have to stay within the rules. Although some people don't want to stay within the rules, which is a different conversation.
A whole different conversation. And so, okay, so do you like US football, or would you just prefer a different US sport?
I think you mean American football, which
Yeah, I'm sorry, American football. Okay.
I don't. I mean, I've been to 2 Super Bowls. I don't know what they do, but I can tell you when there's a touchdown. I think I've figured that out after 20 something odd years of living in the US. I enjoy the playoffs more than the regular season games, you know, and it's that whole lose or go home thing. It makes it more interesting. As I said, I think I've been to 2 Super Bowls now. I've enjoyed both of them more so for the atmosphere than. I mean, I'm a sports fan, right? So
Right.
just about any sports can be interesting other than golf, because I don't even know that that's a sport, to be honest. But
I'm a golfer. It's a sport.
I know you're a golfer. Well, you take away the ball and it's just walking. Yeah. But so I enjoy sports. I basketball is probably the closest to football in terms of American sports that I like. So I like the Golden State Warriors. I like Stephen Curry, or Steph Curry as they call him, and basketball's my thing.
Okay. All right. So New York or London? Which one?
That's a tough one. Not a fair question, too. I mean, my family is in London, right? And my team is in London. So for those two reasons, I would pick London. But I think it's a very, very close call. I mean, New York's a tough place to live. I enjoy it, but it's a really tough place to live.
And so what other place in the world would you say that everybody should visit? Is there one place that you've been that you feel like everybody should visit?
Ooh, I'd say Barcelona. I really like
I love
Barcelona.
it. Yeah.
It's probably the one place, how people make a little bit of money and they go buy a second home. If I had a little bit of money, I would buy a second home in Barcelona. I really like Barcelona.
Yeah, I like, it reminded me of almost like it reminded me more of Paris than Spain for some reason. But
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I just came back from Paris. I like Paris, but not in the same way, right? Paris is just another big city. They like London, Paris, New York. I mean, to me, they're not just. But there's something about Barcelona that is less quaint. You know what I thought you were going to say is, it doesn't remind me of DC in terms of the architecture, or in terms of other things, but it's got the more mellow vibe,
and
right?
flavor. It has some flavor,
Right,
right?
right, right. I mean, Spain generally has a lesser crazy vibe than New York, right? But I like Barcelona a lot. I wouldn't mind owning a place there.
Okay, well, when you buy it, let me know. I
I
want to
will
visit.
I will let you know. I will let
And we're
you know.
going to Nigeria. Don't
For,
forget.
for sure. That's for sure.
So we're almost out of time, Claudius. This has been wonderful. I am smiling ear to ear. I love your story. I am I'm glad to have met you and be your friend and each other's confidants. But before we end, I just want to ask you, what words of encouragement or advice do you have for others, particularly, young people, people of color, people, first gen people in our profession or in the, in general, um, about, you know, maintaining your authenticity, but still striving for success.
I'm still looking for advice myself, right? But the 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 thing that I I always say to people is like, you got to figure out where you want to go, and then you got to figure out all the people that are gonna help you get there, and you got to be true to yourself. And 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 that kind of sounds almost cliche, but it has worked for me. I generally find folks to surround myself with who can help me be a better version of me. And the difficult part of this is you don't know what you don't know.
Hmm.
But there are people who know what I don't know, and I just try to find them. And then I take from every little thing that people tell me, and I come up with my own my own path. It is very, very rare that I only follow one person's views. I try and get a number of different views and then bring them together to find what works best for me. And what works best for me doesn't always work for everybody else. I kind of always I was raised to think that I was different. I was raised to
Hmm.
think that I was unique. I was raised to think that I'm badass. I still
Hmm.
think I'm
You
badass, right?
are.
And so I just take my badass self and go do badass things. And sometimes, frankly, I can't tell you how I did it until it's been done. And then I reflect on that. But what has been a constant is hard work, is not being too big for my own shoes, finding people who've been there and who are honest and people of integrity and good standing in society who I align with and try and learn from. I think I've checked all the boxes that I set out to check when I boarded the plane to come to the US in 1996. But I still have mentors. I still have people I turn to and say, hey, look, how do I manage this? This is what's going on. This is what's happening with the board. Can I get some words of wisdom? And I usually end up appearing much smarter and much wiser than I am because there are people I can turn to who can help me. And that to me is very important. Being able to surround yourself with people who are good people and people who can help guide your career, even if they're your peers sometimes. So, I have quarterly meetings with my what I call my kitchen cabinet of people, and we talk things through. And sometimes I call you and say, "Hey, what do you think? I
Right.
want to do this. What do you think?" And then you go make a decision, and you hope you're making all of the right decisions. And it's not always right, right? You make mistakes, and you get up and you start over. And that's where perseverance comes in. And so that's what I think.
Well, what I would say is is that one, you're not afraid to ask for help, and there's nothing wrong with asking for help. Anybody who claims that they made it or have been successful without any help is delusional, right? And then the other takeaway that I have from knowing you and everything that you've said to on this podcast is that you have courage, and it takes courage to do things that might be, different, to do things outside of the box, take a risk, have the courage to do it, and you've definitely done that.
Well, I've tried to. So thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And our time is up. I hate to say it, but this is a great place to end. You talked about differences, and that's what this is all about. And I just want to say thank you, Claudius, for being here to BS with me today.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. It's been an honor to call you my friend, and I look forward to many, many years of that friendship.
Absolutely. I'm not going anywhere except to Nigeria or Barcelona.
Exactly.
And thank you to everyone for listening. And until next episode, remember that everybody is different, and different is good.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
We hope you enjoyed the stories shared in today's episode of BS, Beyond Stereotypes. Join us next time when another authentic personality unleashes their uniqueness on the world.